Wife gives birth to baby girl. Dad sees newspaper and calls 911 immediately. Imagine the excitement in the air as a young couple, after months of anticipation, finally welcome their baby girl into the world. For David and Sarah, this was supposed to be the happiest day of their lives. David, a proud new father, stood by his wife's side as she held their newborn daughter for the first time. The hospital room was filled with joy, the soft sounds of their baby's gentle cries, and the loving gazes of two parents who had longed for this moment. Sarah's tired but glowing smile radiated pure happiness as she whispered, "We did it," as they cradled their baby girl, discussing the beautiful name they had chosen for her. Everything seemed perfect. The doctors reassured them that both mother and baby were healthy, and the overwhelming emotions of love and relief flooded their hearts. Sarah was exhausted, but blissfully content. Meanwhile, David couldn't wait to share the news with friends and family. He snapped a few photos, texted his parents, and even posted a quick update on social media. But while Sarah was being prepped to rest, something caught David's eye. He reached over to the nightstand, where someone had left the daily newspaper. With a casual glance, he started flipping through it, looking for something to pass the time. But then, something strange jumped out at him. His breath caught in his throat as he stared at the front page. The headline sent a chill down his spine. It read something far more disturbing than any new father should have to process. Missing newborns. Hospital under investigation. David's hands trembled. His mind raced as he quickly skimmed the article. The story detailed a string of unsettling incidents happening at local hospitals. Babies reported missing shortly after birth. A few cases involved suspicious details, and the authorities were urging parents to be extra cautious. His pulse quickened as he looked around the room, his gaze darting between the hospital staff and the tiny bundle in Sarah's arms. Could this really be happening? Was it just a coincidence, or was something wrong here? David tried to remain calm. He didn't want to alarm Sarah, especially after everything she'd been through. But the words from the article kept echoing in his mind. Hospitals in the area were being investigated for possible foul play. He couldn't shake the uneasy feeling creeping over him. What if their baby was in danger? What if someone was watching them right now, waiting for the right moment? He needed to act fast. His heart pounded in his chest as he grabbed his phone. Without hesitating, David dialed 911. His mind was racing, his thoughts clouded with panic, but he had to protect his family. The call connected, and he took a deep breath, trying to keep his voice steady as he explained the situation to the EY's operator. "My wife just gave birth, and I'm at the hospital, but I think something's wrong." The operator's voice was calm, but David could hear the tension. "Sir, what is your emergency?" David took another look at the newspaper, then back at his newborn daughter. "There's a news story about missing babies from hospitals in the area. I don't know what's going on, but I don't want to take any chances." The operator asked for more details, and David tried to give her as much information as possible, but everything felt like a blur. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him, the fear of the unknown growing with each passing second. What if he was overreacting? But what if he wasn't? He couldn't afford to risk it. Suddenly, the door to their hospital room creaked open, and a nurse walked in with a clipboard. She smiled warmly, completely unaware of the chaos spinning inside David's mind. "How are we doing in here?" she asked sweetly. David's heart skipped a beat. It was supposed to be the happiest day of David's life. The moment he and his wife Sarah had been waiting for had finally arrived. The birth of their baby girl. After months of preparation, excitement, and nervous anticipation, they were now parents. David couldn't stop smiling as he watched Sarah hold their newborn daughter in her arms for the first time. The room was quiet, filled with that warm sense of peace that only comes with the arrival of a new life. Sarah looked exhausted, but her smile was full of joy and love as she gazed down at the tiny bundle wrapped in a soft pink blanket. David, too, felt overwhelmed. His heart swelled with pride and happiness, as though everything in the world had aligned perfectly for this moment. He gently kissed Sarah on the forehead and whispered, "You did amazing." She gave him a tired, but grateful, smile in return. The nurses had just left the room to give them some privacy, promising to return soon to check on them and the baby. For now, it was just the three of them. David pulled out his phone, snapping a few pictures to share with family and friends, eager to announce the big news. It felt like nothing could go wrong until something unexpected happened. As Sarah dozed off for a quick nap, David decided to keep himself occupied while staying close by her side. On the bedside table, he noticed a newspaper someone had left behind. Curious, he picked it up and started flipping through the pages, not expecting anything out of the ordinary. But then, a headline caught his attention, and his heart immediately sank. Mysterious hospital incidents. Babies reported missing in local facilities. David froze. His eyes darted over the words again, hoping he'd misread them. But there it was, in black and white. Several cases of newborns disappearing from hospitals in the area just hours after their births. His stomach twisted with an overwhelming sense of dread. The article described how police were investigating a potential criminal operation targeting vulnerable new families. They warned parents to be vigilant and on high alert. David's mind began to race. He looked over at Sarah and their newborn daughter, sleeping peacefully, completely unaware of what he had just read. He wanted to believe that this was just a coincidence. After all, what were the odds? But the longer he stared at the newspaper, the more the anxiety clawed at him. Could it be happening here? Was their hospital part of this terrifying trend? The article mentioned that the incidents were still under investigation, with no clear leads or suspects. But that didn't calm David's nerves. He couldn't help but feel like something was off. He glanced at the hospital room door, half expecting someone to walk in at any moment with bad news. His protective instincts kicked in, and suddenly all he could think about was how to keep his wife and newborn safe. He told himself not to overreact, that everything was probably fine. But what if it wasn't? What if their baby was in danger right now, and he had no idea? Unable to shake the growing fear, David quickly pulled out his phone again, not to text family this time, but to dial 911. His hands shook as he pressed the numbers, his mind racing with thoughts he couldn't control. He didn't want to panic Sarah, but he couldn't take any chances. Better to be safe than sorry, he thought. The phone rang once, then twice, before an operator picked up. 911, what's your emergency? David's voice was shaky as he tried to explain. I'm at the hospital. My wife just gave birth. But I just read something in the newspaper about babies going missing from hospitals nearby. The operator stayed calm, asking him to slow down and give more details. David recounted everything he'd read, his voice low, so Sarah wouldn't wake up and worry. I don't know what to do, he admitted, his eyes darting around the room nervously. I feel like something isn't right. The operator assured him that the authorities would investigate, but David still couldn't shake the fear gripping his heart. He thanked the operator and hung up, trying to keep his composure. But now, every sound in the hospital seemed suspicious. Every creak of the door or footstep in the hallway sent his pulse racing. Just as David was about to check on Sarah, the door to the hospital room slowly opened. He turned, expecting to see a nurse, but something about the figure standing in the doorway made his breath catch. The person was dressed in scrubs, but their face was hidden beneath a surgical mask and cap, making it impossible for David to recognize them. The figure paused for a moment, as if assessing the room. David's heart pounded in his chest, his protective instincts flaring up again. Something wasn't right. Why hadn't they knocked? Why were they just standing there? David took a step toward the bed, instinctively placing himself between the stranger and his family. His mind was screaming at him to do something, to protect them, but he didn't want to make a scene. If this was all just a misunderstanding. "Can I help you?" David asked, his voice tense. The figure didn't respond right away, just stood there, staring at the baby in Sarah's arms. Time seemed to stretch out, every second filled with unbearable tension. David's hand hovered over his phone, ready to call for help again. Finally, the stranger spoke, their voice muffled through the mask. "I'm here to check on the baby," they said, their tone emotionless, cold. David's instincts told him not to trust them. Something was very, very wrong. Before he could react, the figure took a step closer to the bed, and David's heart dropped. He knew in that moment he had to act, now. But then, the room's intercom buzzed, interrupting the tension. "David, we need you at the front desk," a voice said over the speaker. David's eyes darted between the masked figure and the intercom. His pulse raced as he realized the next decision he made could change everything. Should he confront the stranger or leave the room to find out what was happening at the front desk? David's mind raced as he stood frozen in the hospital room, the masked figure just feet away from his wife and newborn daughter. The voice over the intercom echoed in his ears, but he couldn't tear his eyes away from the stranger. His instincts screamed at him to stay, to protect his family from whatever danger had just stepped through that door. But why had the front desk called for him? What was happening out there? The masked figure took another step toward the bed, and David's heart raced. He clenched his fists, ready to do whatever it took to keep his wife and child safe. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice sharp and filled with a rising panic. "What do you want?" The figure hesitated, and for a split second, David could see their eyes behind the mask. There was something in their expression, a flash of uncertainty, of fear. But before the stranger could respond, a knock came at the door, followed by the familiar face of a nurse. "David," she said, her voice calm and professional. "We need you at the front desk, but it's not an emergency. We've just had a little mix-up with your paperwork." David looked back and forth between the nurse and the masked figure, his mind still clouded with suspicion. "What about them?" he asked, pointing to the stranger in scrubs. "Why are they here?" The nurse frowned in confusion, glancing at the masked figure. "Oh, that's Dr. Miller," she said. "He's covering for one of the other pediatricians. Tonight, he was just doing a routine check on your baby." David felt a wave of relief and embarrassment wash over him all at once. The tension in the room dissolved as the nurse's explanations sank in. The masked figure, the doctor, nodded and gave David a small apologetic smile beneath the mask. "Sorry if I startled you," the doctor said. "I didn't mean to cause any alarm. I just wanted to make sure your baby was doing well." David's shoulders relaxed, and he let out a shaky breath. "I'm sorry," he said, feeling foolish for jumping to conclusions. "I've just been on edge after reading that newspaper article. It made me paranoid." The nurse gave him a sympathetic smile. "I understand. The news can be scary sometimes, but I assure you, you and your family are safe here." David nodded, feeling a little more at ease. He apologized again to the doctor, who assured him there were no hard feelings. "It's normal for new parents to feel protective," the doctor said, finishing the checkup on the baby. Everything looks great. You've got a healthy, beautiful baby girl." David's heart swelled with pride as he looked at his daughter, peacefully asleep in Sarah's arms. The fear and uncertainty that had gripped him moments before began to fade, replaced by the overwhelming love he had felt from the start. He thanked the nurse and the doctor before heading to the front desk to clear up the paperwork. When he returned to the room, Sarah was awake, smiling softly as she watched their baby. David sat beside her, taking her hand in his. "Everything's okay," he said quietly. "It was just a misunderstanding." Sarah nodded, resting her head against his shoulder. "I knew you'd keep us safe." As the night went on, David couldn't help but reflect on the roller coaster of emotions he had experienced. The fear, the uncertainty, the protectiveness. It all came from a place of love. Becoming a father had changed him in ways he couldn't fully understand yet. But one thing was clear: his family would always come first. In the end, what had felt like a terrifying crisis turned out to be nothing more than a misunderstanding. A reminder of how fear can sometimes cloud our judgment. But David realized that the instinct to protect his loved ones wasn't something to be ashamed of. It was part of what made him a good father. And in a way, the experience had brought him even closer to his new role as a parent. As the hospital quieted down for the night, David sat beside his wife and daughter, feeling grateful for their safety, for the love they shared, and for the bright future ahead of them. The challenges and fears of the day had passed, and now all that remained was the deep sense of joy that came with being a family. And as David looked down at his sleeping daughter, he couldn't help but smile, knowing that no matter what challenges might come, they would face them together